Ovid's Metamorphoses is an epic poem telling many myths over 15 books. Book 1 tells the stories of the creation of the world, the 4 ages of mankind, Jupiter walking the earth, Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha repopulating the earth, Cupid taking revenge on Apollo by making him fall in love with Daphne, who spurns him, Jupiter's pining for Io, making his wife Juno jealous, Phaeton learning he's Apollo's son and setting out to prove it. Book 2 tells the stories of Phaeton flying and crashing Apollo's chariot, Jupiter's love for the nymph Callisto, the story of how the raven became jet black, Mercury playing tricks, then pining for Herse, with Minerva getting involved, and Jupiter tricking and carrying away Europa in his desire. In Book 3, Cadmus is sent to find his sister, but ends up founding Thebes. His grandson Actaeon has a run-in with the goddess Diana. Semele gives birth to a son with Jupiter, Bacchus, but then dies. Tiresias weighs in on Jupiter and Juno's arguments about whether men or women get more pleasure from sex. The story of Echo and Narcissus is told. Pentheus is killed by his mother and aunt when he disrespects the new god Bacchus. In Book 4, the daughters of Minyas refuse to worship Bacchus, telling the stories of Pyramus and Thisbe, Apollo and Leucothoe, and Salmacis and Hermaphroditus. Juno plots against Bacchus's aunt Ino and her family. Cadmus leaves Thebes in distress, and he and his wife become snakes. Perseus flies to the kingdom of Atlas, where he slays a sea monster and marries Andromeda. In Book 5, Phineus and Perseus fight at Andromeda and Theseus' wedding. Perseus turns Phineus to stone, using Medusa's severed head. Minerva learns about a storytelling contest between the Muses and 9 mortal sisters who lost and returned to magpies. Calliope tells the story of Proserpine's abduction, where she is taken to the underworld. Diana turns Arethusa into a sacred spring to escape a river god. And Ceres turns a king into a lynx after he tries to murder a messenger who brings sacred seeds. In Book 6, Minerva and Arachne compete in a weaving contest, and Arachne is turned into a spider. Niobe disrespects Latona, goddess of childbirth, so Latona has her children killed. Tyreus marries Procne, but falls in love with her sister, Philomela, kidnapping and raping her until Procne rescues her, and the sisters get revenge by cooking and eating Procne and Tyreus' son. Boreas, a wind god, woos Oreithia with words, but kidnaps her and flies off. Book 7 tells the story of Jason's quest for the Golden Fleece. After falling in love with Jason, Medea helps him achieve his goal and restores his father's youth. When she discovers her husband Jason has taken a new bride, she kills the children she had with him. King Aeacus tells of the Myrmidons, ants transformed into people. Cephalus tells the story of how he mistakenly killed his wife when she spied on him after hearing a rumor about his infidelity. In Book 8, Scylla falls in love with Minos, who's at war with her father's city. Trying to betray her father to Minos, she's rejected, and her father turns her into a bird. In Crete, Minos forces Daedalus, an artist and inventor, to build a maze for the Minotaur, Minos' monstrous brother. Daedalus makes his escape on makeshift wings of feathers and wax, with tragic consequences. Daedalus murders his nephew Perdix, who's turned into a partridge. Meleager and his men try to kill a boar sent by Diana, but a young woman kills it. Defending the woman, Meleager kills his uncles. In retribution, his mother, Althea, kills him. Baucis and Philemon unknowingly offer hospitality to Jupiter and Mercury, and are rewarded. Erysichthon is cursed with insatiable hunger after cutting down a sacred tree, ultimately eating himself alive. In Book 9, Achelous tells the story of Hercules and his wife Deianira. When a centaur tries to rape her, Hercules kills the centaur, but before he dies, he gives Deianira a poison shirt he says is a love charm. She gives it to Hercules, nearly killing him. Hercules' mother tells the story of his birth. Juno sent the goddess Lucina to stop it, but was foiled. Dryope picks a lotus flower, not realizing it was a nymph, and is turned into a tree. Jupiter tells the gods he cannot restore youth to anyone. Byblis falls in love with her twin brother, Caunus. Lastly, Lygdus tells his wife he'll kill their baby if it isn't a boy. Iphis is born female, but raised as a boy, and is changed into a man on the night Iphis marries the girl Ianthe. In Book 10, Eurydice is killed by a snake the day of her wedding to Orpheus, who tries but fails to rescue her from the underworld. Orpheus plays the lyre and sings of Cyparissus, Ganymede, and Hyacinthus, young boys loved by the gods. The Propoetides offend Venus, who exacts revenge. Orpheus sings of Pygmalion, who fell in love with his sculpture of an idealized woman. Years later, Pygmalion's daughter Mira is cursed and falls in love with her own father, Cinyras. The gods transform her into a tree, and Adonis, her child with her father, is born. Cupid accidentally hits Venus with an arrow, and she falls in love with Adonis, who is killed while hunting. In Book 11, the Maenads stone Orpheus to death and rip his body apart. He joins Eurydice in the underworld. Bacchus turns the Maenads into trees. In the next story, Bacchus bestows King Midas with the golden touch, which becomes a curse, and Bacchus reverses it. Midas attends a music contest between Pan and Apollo, but disagrees with the results when Apollo wins. Apollo gives Midas donkey ears. In the next story, King Laomedon of Troy makes deals with Neptune, Apollo, and Hercules, but breaks them all. Proteus helps Peleus rape Thetis, who becomes pregnant with Achilles. Peleus is forced into exile after murdering his brother Phocus and visits King Ceyx, who tells him the story of his brother Daedalion, who throws himself off a cliff after Diana kills his daughter Chione for being arrogant about her twins, fathered by Apollo and Mercury. He then becomes a bird. A giant wolf is attacking livestock in Peleus' homeland, an act of revenge by Phocus' mother, Psamathe. Ceyx goes to consult an oracle, but a storm destroys his ship, and he drowns. In Book 12, Paris steals Helen from Menelaus, king of Sparta, and a war breaks out. Achilles battles sickness, whose father Neptune turns him into a swan, and the armies call a truce. Nestor tells of how Neptune rapes a woman, Cenis, then grants her the wish to be turned into a man so she can't be raped again. She becomes the warrior Ceneus and attends a wedding, during which the centaurs and Lapiths get into a brawl. No one knows how it ends. Nestor tells another tale of Paris killing Achilles with an arrow, and Ajax and Ulysses arguing over who gets Achilles' armor. In Book 13, Ulysses wins Achilles' armor, and Ajax kills himself in shame. Troy falls. Hecuba, the queen of Troy, loses her last two surviving children. One is a sacrifice, one murdered by his brother-in-law, Polymestor. Hecuba gouges out Polymester's eyes and is turned into a dog. In the next story, a flock of birds, the Memonides, arise from the ashes of Memnon's funeral pyre. Aeneas visits a king who tells the story of the abduction of his daughters, who were turned into birds to escape. In the next story, Polyphemus kills Galatea's lover, Acis, who's turned into a river god. In the final story, sea god Glaucus falls in love with Scylla, who rejects him, so he goes to Circe for advice. In Book 14, Glaucus tells Circe of his love for Scylla. Circe offers herself to him, but is rejected. Jealous, Circe turns Scylla into a monster made of raging dogs. Circe also loves Ulysses, and Scylla attacks his men. Aeneas visits the Sibyl about how he might visit the underworld to see the spirit of his father. Two of Ulysses' men share stories of their adventures. Achaemenides was rescued from Polyphemus' island by the Trojans. Macarius, along with Ulysses' other men, was turned into a pig by Circe, but later released from the spell. Meanwhile, the marriage of King Picus and Canaans is destroyed when Circe turns him into a woodpecker after he rejects her advances, and Canaans dissolves into thin air. Aeneas' story resumes. Aeneas and Turnus fight over who will marry the king's daughter. Turnus burns Aeneas' ships, but the gods turn them into nymphs. Aeneas becomes a god. His son takes over the kingdom. Vertumnus, god of the seasons, attempts to woo a nymph, Pomona, in disguise. And the story of Iphis, a man treated cruelly by a rejecting woman, is told. Years later, Romulus unites the warring Sabines and Romans, and Rome is founded. The gods deify Romulus and his wife. In Book 15, Rome's new ruler, Numa, who travels to enrich his knowledge, meets Pythagoras, a philosopher, who tells him about how change is the underlying principle of all things in the universe. Numa rules peacefully until his death. Hippolytus tells the story of how he died and was brought back to life. Egeria mourns, becoming a spring. In the next story, Sippus finds he has grown horns and hears a prophecy that he will rule Rome and warns the Roman people of the prophecy and is rewarded with a farm. A plague descends on Rome. Aesculapius, in the form of a giant serpent, stops the plague. Venus notices plots being formed against Julius Caesar, but Jupiter tells her not to intercede, and that Augustus, Caesar's son, will take power. In the poem's epilogue, Ovid claims eternal fame.